Welcome back to the Impact Storytelling Podcast. I'm your host Sabine Probst, and today I'm joined by storyteller and National Geographic explorer Gabriela Tajeda. Gabby is a conservation storyteller and National Geographic explorer who currently works on the Nature Conservancy's global storytelling team. A Boston College graduate, she moved to the Florida Keys to work in the environmental conservation sector, for which she quickly developed a knack for connecting storytelling, science, and change-making. For her work in conservation outreach and on social media, Tajeda creates powerful visuals and narratives to immerse audiences in the South Florida Everglades. Her current National Geographic Society grant project focuses on capturing, through photography and video, the changing underwater world of mangroves in the Everglades. She's a public speaker, 2 times Jackson Wild Fellow, and the Dry Tortuga artist in residence. Her conservation writing, video, and photography have been featured in national publications, and she loves producing Everglades-based content for her social media. Inspired by the beauty and sense of belonging that the natural world provides, Tajeda is driven to explore, connect, and share the mysteries of our wild spaces. Welcome to the podcast, Gabby. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm eager to learn more about the Everglades, mangroves, and your unique storytelling approach. Let's dive into our conversation. When you first began studying biology and English, did you envision a future in conservation storytelling?
I felt that conservation storytelling was a little bit out of reach. I thought it was kind of this dream gig. And I always used to have National Geographic magazines and I would see the explorers and I just thought, it's a far away thing. It would probably never happen for me, but that it was going to be something really cool that I could hopefully achieve one day. But no, I never actually thought that it would happen. So it's awesome that it turned out to happen.
Yeah, definitely super inspiring. And during your studies, you spent a year abroad in Australia. What sparked your interest in focusing more on conservation and communication during that time?
When I was in Australia, I was studying at the University of Melbourne, and I also got a job working at the Melbourne Zoo, which is part of a conservation organization called Zoos Victoria. And while I was there, I got to see how they were able to use marketing and marketing campaigns and storytelling to help bring back a species from extinction. And their whole mission was to help the 14 local species that were super threatened and on the brink of extinction in the state of Victoria. And so being able to see the work that they were able to do through these massive multi-month marketing campaigns and the change that they were able to accomplish was really, really inspiring. And it was the first time that I had realized that there were other ways to help animals that didn't necessarily revolve around medicine, because I was training to be a veterinarian at the time. So I thought, well, I could actually try something different, go into marketing in a more creative space. And so it was my job at the Melbourne Zoo that really, really switched that perspective for me.
Was there a specific campaign they had at the time where you thought, oh, that is something I would like to do in my future?
Yeah. When I was at the zoo specifically, I was there during the campaign for the corroboree frog, which is this tiny little frog that's like the size of your thumbnail. And
It's really tiny.
it was so random. And it was one of the 14 species, local species I think there was like 13 left in the wild at that point. And they just had this super comprehensive campaign planned out, and they also had National Geographic exhibits, and they did AR exhibits, augmented reality exhibits in the zoo. They had music series, they had a giant parade, but what really caught my eye was the augmented reality exhibits and the use of photography to continue inspiring people and engaging them with wildlife and whatnot. And I don't know, I felt like it was such a cool and different approach. I didn't expect to see a big exhibit like that within a zoo. I guess I was just thinking about the animals, but this one was using technology as a way to engage visitors with different campaigns and different initiatives, conservation initiatives, and just to have fun too. So that really stuck in my mind, and it was something that I ended up circling back to later on in my career. But the augmented reality exhibit was something that I was like, wow, that's really cool, and it was sort of pinned back here. So I really was inspired by that. That was very, very amazing.
It does sound like it, and it's definitely not something that I would expect from a zoo, but I think it's great that they're also going an alternative route sometimes, because I feel like a lot of it can be shown with augmented reality and virtual reality.
Yes.
And then not always the animals have to be captured for people to look at them.
Yeah, exactly. It was a good combination. It was trying something new. And they've talked, I mean, there's always been a conversation about, do zoos go completely virtual? But I think that it's useful to have both, right? Find a balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After graduating, you worked with an NGO focused on marine conservation before transitioning into the work in the Everglades. What is it about the Everglades that captured your heart and inspired you to stay rather than continuing to work with coral reefs?
Ooh, that's a good question. I initially moved to the Florida Keys for a marine conservation internship, and it was very much focused on the coral reefs. And then I did an externship program, and I had to tell a story that took place in the Everglades. And it was such a different, totally otherworldly landscape. And I just found it to be so fascinating that you could be on the water or in the water. And there was just so much going on no matter where you looked. I felt like when I was on the ocean side, you had to be below the surface, diving or snorkeling in order to see stuff. But when you're on the boat, there's not a whole lot going on. It's just a lot of blue, which is beautiful in its own way. And then when I would be out in the bay on the Everglades, there was stuff everywhere, in the sky, on the surface, just below the surface. You're in inches of water and there's just life everywhere. And you can be in the water or on it, whatever. And I started to explore the Everglades a lot on my own, but I feel like the first thing that really kicked it off was a job that I got just before this externship program, leading eco tours into the Everglades. And it was inspiring because I got to see people's reaction to the fact that the Everglades is not just a bug infested swamp like most people think. It's actually, it's blue water and manatees and dolphins, seagrass and mangroves, right? There's just all these different habitats within this huge ecosystem. And so I was intrigued to learn more about it. And there's a bird, a bright pink bird called a roseate spoonbill that people oftentimes think is a flamingo, which we also have out here. But that was a bird that always got me really excited because when you'd spot it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a roseate, everyone look. And everyone would get so excited about that one bird that comes during the winter months. So, there were things that you would start to see on a regular basis and things that you don't usually see that were kind of rare, and little sharks swimming around. There's so much life and so much biodiversity. And so I think that job really kicked it off for me. And then I started to tell stories and I started to get deeper and deeper. And it's just unlike anything out there. It's one of a kind. It really is.
Yeah, it sounds definitely amazing. I'm so eager to go there. I'm definitely going to come and visit you once.
Please come visit me. I'll give you a tour.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely want to do that. So you just said you did an externship, and what were your responsibilities during that externship?
Yeah, the externship was a remote program. And so 100 of us were selected globally to essentially identify a marine conservation related issue in our region or in our community. And then we had to get involved with it and tell a story about it. And so essentially that started off with isolating an issue and then doing research about this issue and conducting interviews with people that could tell you more about this issue, and then also propose potential solutions to this problem. And it was really a way to learn about these issues, learn about issues in your local community, but then also it was a tool to help you get out there and get involved. And I think having names like National Geographic Society and the Nature Conservancy behind you really helped elevate that and helped you kind of get out there and say, I'm writing this story, I need this information. Can you tell me more? So my story started in one direction and ended up pivoting, as most stories do, within the research phase and the process. But I learned so much about this ecosystem and how our community is getting involved and what we can do better. So it was a really cool research storytelling opportunity.
Yeah, it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And amazing that you were living in Florida at the time and still do to get to experience all of that. It's really amazing. And as part of this collaboration, you received seed project funding from National Geographic Society and the Nature Conservancy. You designed an immersive, accessible, and inclusive multimedia exhibit at Zoo Miami. Can you tell us more about what inspired this project?
Yeah. So after I wrote this piece and produced this piece, that was a heavy photography. So I wanted to make sure that it was a visual story as well. And I went out and shot photos of fire from a helicopter and went out in the Everglades and took photos. And so, and I did that because I wanted to immerse people into this landscape and show them these angles of the Everglades that they had never seen before. And my natural thought after the project came to an end, even though I was awarded this funding, I thought, well, how could I take this to the next step? How could I make photos more engaging? And so initially I thought, I could do film, and I tried it and I was like, I don't know how to do this. I used a gimbal. Actually, I used a gimbal on an airboat, and that sounds crazy for people who don't know what those things are, but it's camera stabilizer on a boat that's propelled by basically a jet engine that flies through the grass. And it was a lot. It was overwhelming. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to do this right now. So I pivoted and I thought, well, what's another way that people can step into a photograph, or that how they can step into the Everglades? And I thought, well, we could build it. And so I designed a multimedia exhibit that would allow people to feel like they're stepping into the Everglades. So literally like a Disney exhibit, having these props and these pieces, and then also using technology like augmented reality for people to interact with these animals that we don't really get to see, because a lot of them are nocturnal or they're deep in the Everglades where it's inaccessible to people unless you're flying over. And allow people to experience it and feel like they're getting this, up close and personal interaction with these species. So it was a big project design, a big haul. And it was a really cool process to just learn what it's like to design an exhibit and all these consideration and factors. And it was like a really cool, unexpected approach, but something different. And it had a great response. So.
Yeah, it definitely sounds really cool. I want to go through that exhibit and see all of it. And this remarkable story map is available online, and I will be linking it in the show notes for our listeners. But how did you go about taking all of these photos? You said you took some photos from a helicopter or from a helicopter?
Yeah, helicopter, yeah.
And also from a boat. Were these the only two times you went out, or how many times did you go and take photos? And what is it with the fires in the Everglades?
Yes, good question. Well, as for the photos, I spent pretty much like a couple of days. Gosh, that whole fire photo shoot happened over one day in terms of the aerial shots. Being able to get on a helicopter while they're doing prescribed fires is very difficult. And I had a very good friend. He became a very good friend through this whole process. He was a neighbor of mine, actually, but he helped me and connected me to all of these scientists, and he's a fire specialist. So he really helped me with this story and getting the photos that I needed. So part of the photos, yes, were taken from a helicopter in an afternoon over the course of a few hours. And then some of the other photos were just taken on different burns while walking, burns that you can do by foot, where the trucks are walking, or the trucks are driving beside you and you're walking and pouring gasoline. And then we also had the opportunity to, wait a second, I don't think it's gasoline. I don't know what the drip torches are, but it's whatever chemicals and something's in there to ignite things. And then also on the airboats, which are very unique to the Everglades. I'm not sure where else they have airboats in the world, but essentially they're these metal boats that are propelled by a giant fan, and it blows the boat forward, and then they just go right over the grass. And so you have the fire specialists on the boats, and they're lighting fire off of the boats, as they're going. It was a really crazy experience. So it was days out in the field. And then there were other photos that I had from before, just being out in the Everglades, that I incorporated into the map as well. So it was like a combination. And in terms of, what role fire plays in the Everglades, a lot of people don't know that Florida is one of the lightning capitals in the world, meaning it gets the most lightning strikes of any area in the US and one of the highest rates in the world. And so fire is a very natural thing that occurs in this system. And for the longest time, before all the development, fire would strike, and it burns naturally in this sort of mosaic pattern, and it puts itself out. So it doesn't just burn everything to a crisp. And there's a very special balance between fire and water in this ecosystem, where if there's insufficient water while a fire burns, then it'll burn everything to a crisp, right? It'll burn the important parts of the plant, and then the plant won't survive. And then if there's too much water, things won't ignite. So they won't burn. And over time, if the system isn't burning, then it's compiling all of this excess vegetation and other, organic materials that are piling up over time. And that can impact distribution of nutrients, that can impact the water moving through the system. It's like a big block. So fire and water work together. At the right balance of water, you apply fire to a system, and naturally a fire would ignite, and it burns, and it actually acts, it's like a sponge. So when it burns through these big systems of just like all this decomposed vegetation, it wrings out all of these nutrients, and it has such a positive effect on the ecosystem. The plants grow better, the animals eat better because these nutrients fall into the soils, and then it goes all the way up the food chain. And also when you're burning through the system, you're clearing out these pathways for water to flow through the system better and carry those nutrients, and it goes all the way into the bay. But the biggest issue has been that these two, what I compared them to in the story, I said that they're like lovers that used to run across the Everglades together, and they used to help restore and revive the landscape. And then people came in and interfered. We fragmented the land. We pulled these two characters away from one another, these two lovers away from one another. And so now fire specialists are trying to bring it back. What they're trying to do through fire prescription is bring back a system that has always been, and they're trying to bring it back into a system that it doesn't really experience fire on its own anymore. We have too many canals and too many buildings, and so when lightning strikes, it's not striking naturally in the grass anymore and burning across the Everglades. So they work hand in hand, and with the right temperature and the right wind and all the right factors taken into consideration, you can apply a dose of fire and really help every aspect of the landscape.
It's really interesting. I don't think too many people know about that, especially outside of Florida. It's really cool. I did not think that fire can be something good. You could just light it. It's really interesting.
It's socially, right? Like there's a lot of aspects of fire that have become, weaponized, I guess, or, when you don't burn in areas for a long enough time, when fire can't happen naturally the way that it used to before people came into the land, wherever you are. And when you start drying out the land and desertifying it, right? Like fires now, they will burn much, much hotter. And if fire isn't happening on a regular basis, like it naturally was meant to for thousands of years, then things pile up and it's fuel, they call it. And so over time, if a wildfire decides to strike, it will burn. It'll go crazy. And so this is preventative measures as well. And it's scary, but when it's done through prescription, when it's done in a controlled setting, you avoid so much destruction down the line, and you're helping an ecosystem that craves it. That's actually the cool thing. Also, I didn't mention before, is that a fantastic way to actually it proves that the Everglades is not only fire adapted, but it's fire dependent, right? Is that the native species in the Everglades, they know what to do. The native species survive fire like that. And within days, you have fresh growth coming up after a burn. Invasive species don't. So they use it as a method to control invasive species. So species that aren't meant to be there, they can't handle fire. And I think that that's so brilliant because, the ones that are thrive off of it. So really cool.
Amazing. Yeah, that definitely sounds really cool and really interesting.
Yeah.
And then following your externship, you began an internship with the Nature Conservancy. And what were some of the key lessons you've learned from working with different NGOs and fulfilling different roles?
That's a great question. I really loved, I did a biodiversity content creator internship with the Nature Conservancy. And it was just such a fantastic opportunity to see what it was like to work for a global conservation organization. They were making so much change on a global scale. And that was sort of the first time that I felt like I had been introduced to a setting like that. A lot of the work I had done prior to that was in kind of smaller conservation settings and local grassroots initiatives. And I learned so much from people that had so much experience in these very specific areas. Both have been so valuable. These fellowship opportunities and these scholarships that I've gotten, they've all been very valuable. And so I think like every experience brings something different. And with TNC, being able to see that they were actually making change and here are the numbers, and now you're a part of that. It was kind of a surreal experience because they took me on, and then I was producing content for them, and they're like, great, we'll put it in. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, really? It felt weird. I was like, oh, this is a big deal, but thank you. Like, you trust me? And it's like, of course we trust you, like we hired you for a reason. Or we, took you on as an intern for a reason. So it was a very valuable experience. Interning for them, and then also with that externship, that was such a great way to get a taste of what storytelling was like, and learning what to do and what not to do. And so every experience has provided some sort of input and has helped mold me into a better storyteller and into a better conservationist. So I've been really, really grateful, especially to work with these organizations, these massive global organizations that have a name, they have a brand, but also just as valuable as the local initiatives that I've been involved with. And being here on the ground, helping my backyard has been really wonderful. So having a local audience as well as a global audience has been really transformative.
And in 2023, that was quite a significant year for you in your career. You became a National Geographic Young Explorer, as young Gabriela probably wanted when she looked through the magazines, and secured a full-time media position at the Nature Conservancy. As you just said, it was an amazing experience interning with them, and now you're working with them. As an explorer, you began working on a fascinating project. Could you tell us what you have been documenting over the past year?
Yes. Yeah, I was like, 7-year-old Gabby would not believe me. Like, I definitely would
Yeah.
not. I was like, I don't think like 21-year-old Gabby would believe you either. Yeah, it was a very, very significant year. Great, fantastic year. Wow. Aside from the massive heat wave that we had, but some that actually inspired my
Mm.
project. So, um, during that same year, there was a giant heat wave, 4 consecutive days of the hottest ever recorded at that time, and there was a massive bleaching event that happened here in the Keys, and everything was focused on the Atlantic side of the Keys, meaning
Mm-hmm.
where the corals are, the shallow corals.
Yeah.
But I had heard whispers around town about um, massive fish kill and seagrass die off, and all these terrible. The lobster were disappearing, and the corals in the bay were dying, and it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was all whispers, and nobody was publicly talking about it, and that really frustrated me. So I went out there, and uh, I I noticed, I found, I guess, thousands of bleached anemones. And these are
Mm-hmm.
anemones that live in the mangroves, specifically Exaptasia pallida, so little glass anemones. And they were stark white. It was the most obvious thing. And they've always been there, but you usually never really see them because they blend in so well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I captured footage of it, and then I immediately shared it. And I was like, hey, hello, people, this is happening in the Everglades, and in the Everglades ecosystem. And, it went viral, and people had this
Yeah.
pretty beautiful response to it. And you could see that, how I had crafted this as more of an observation rather than an opinion and saying, this is how I feel. It was more like, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm seeing. Like, this is what's here. And then I allowed people the space to figure out how it made them feel. And they had a very intense emotional reaction. And it was pretty amazing to see the comments pour in. And then I realized, I have to continue this story. Like, what happens? People are curious. It took 9 months roughly for them to regain their color. But it just kind of begged this question of what's next for this ecosystem. Like, what are these things that
Yeah.
this little underwater world is going through? And is anyone paying attention? It's a very dynamic and beautiful. It's literally space right there in our backyard,
Yeah.
and it's inches. I mean, it is at the surface of the water, and it's so otherworldly and so captivating. And I just felt like it was my duty, having noticed this one aspect of it, noticing that these changes were happening, and so I felt like I needed to continue documenting that. And so, having just been named an explorer, I was able to apply for a grant, and I essentially
Mm-hmm.
pitched this idea of, below the grove, the underwater world of mangroves. And there used to be a fort back in this forest where kids, they had a slide, they had hammocks, they had a bridge, swings, massive, massive fort that the kids used to hang out. And it was back there for decades. I mean, a long time, constantly building
Mm-hmm.
it up. And then in 2017, I think when Irma hit, it totally wiped it out. And so now there's like a couple pieces of wood back
Yeah.
there, but it used to be the spot. And so this is where so much of this underwater world it's in this area, in this forest. And so even though people don't frequent it that much, and it seems kind of forgotten about now, although people, they fish around that area a lot, and all that, but I felt like there's this world that like nobody is aware of, because they're not taking the time to stop and to notice it and to look, and it's begging to be
Yeah.
noticed. So that's the project, is capturing that through photo and through video as well. But right now, predominantly photograph has been quite powerful in capturing this world beneath the surface.
And it definitely looked amazing. You sent me one of the reels that you posted during the time.
Okay.
Let's have a look at it.
Last summer, I found thousands of bleached anemones in the mangroves behind my neighborhood. And it wasn't just anemones affected by the weeks of record-breaking heat. Sponges, seagrass, and fish were dying across this Everglades estuary. But when I looked at the news, the media had neglected to cover this story. So I decided then that I would get to work on sharing the stories myself. Through photography and video, I'm bringing you into the underwater world of mangroves to see how this ecosystem adapts to extremes in climate and to recognize what we stand to lose. Mangroves may seem like just a tree, but in the water, they support thriving cities where tons of creatures rest, feed, and raise their young. They also do a lot for our community. They filter our water, they protect us from storms, they even help our economy. But in the last 50 years, the Florida Keys have lost well over half of their mangrove trees, and the ones that are left now face a rapidly changing climate. So join me as I document this mangrove forest through another record-breaking summer and share its unique underwater story.
Very cool. You really wouldn't imagine when you look at it from the top how colorful and beautiful it is underwater and how many different species are living there.
Yes, exactly.
It's fantastic that you're showing it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's super unexpected. And it's all about this idea that like it's hidden in plain sight. And, you know, I see people moving through there all the time, kayaking and not all the time, but occasionally. And typically if you're on a boat, your face isn't right up in the water, right? But, you know, people kind of look down and it doesn't really look like anything. But if you're on a paddleboard and you just lay down and just stop and wait, eventually a door to some world opens and it's beautiful, you know, what you might find. It's like an I Spy book come to life, I guess.
And we saw in the video that a couple of the mangrove trees were cut off. Is that because of development, or why are so many mangrove trees lost now?
Yeah, that was development. Yep, that was actually this past year, 2024. It was a lot in my neighborhood. And oh my gosh, I'm giving myself away, but this is it was me, but I ended up checking. I mean, we had to check with the village and it was eventually reported. And there were white mangroves and red mangroves, buttonwoods. Like these are protected trees and they're protected by the state as well. And if you cut them down, there is a fine. But you can also potentially go to jail depending on like the degree of the situation. But, you know, they were cut probably by an out of town contractor and completely cleared. And I think that, there are also hardwood, like big hardwood trees on that lot as well. And it was sold to new owners. And so, and they were cut down as well. They might have removed some of them, like dug them up and replanted them somewhere else, but I don't know. It just got completely plowed over and now there's a house. The house is going up there. So, they couldn't, it was a canal front property and it just is a bummer. Cause I loved seeing that backyard and it got totally destroyed. And you have to have proper permitting if you're going to cut down these trees, and they did not. But it seems like it continues. It continues, and they're just trees to people, but they don't know exactly, you know, what else they're getting rid of when they remove trees like this.
Yeah. So you still have work to do to educate the people also around your area.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so many of it's interesting because I'll paddle by and most of them, in order to build a dock or something, it's like, you got to cut them down. But, you know, at what point do we live like with the trees? You know, like at what point can we just leave the trees and we figure out a way to build around that? I don't know. So it's tough to watch it, to know that it still happens and people circumvent the rules. And if you have enough money, then it's not a big deal for them. So that's tough.
Yeah, that's also a sad thing. If you have a lot of money, you don't need to always apply to the rules.
Exactly. You think the rules don't apply to you. So
yeah. As we already touched on a little bit, mangroves are often overlooked ecosystems. Why do you think they receive so little attention compared to other environments? Is it because you can't see underneath, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I could be like, I don't know why, but to be honest, they're kind of boring looking. You know, they're not the most sexy thing out there, especially in the world of conservation. You know, when you think of coral reefs and stuff, they're very dynamic, and you know, we call that sexy conservation. Like, that's, everyone wants to be involved with the corals. But when it comes to mangroves, not only are they not like the most objectively the most enticing looking thing, they're just a tree on the water. Yeah, you don't expect, I think, I don't think you expect much from it. I think people look and then make assumptions, and then they don't realize just what exactly is going on at the surface of the water, right? And what's happening in these roots. Yeah. There's so much, but yeah, people, I guess they just don't think about it. They don't know. And there's also a pretty negative association with mangroves historically, because they're growing in swampy areas. They smell bad. The tree doesn't, but the gases that are captured, you know, under the soil, those are definitely, like, they don't smell great. And you've got a lot of birds a lot of times, and people don't like birds. It's like a bunch of reasons, but mosquitoes and bugs, and it's these just like swampy conditions. So historically, mangroves have been removed because people didn't like them, and they wanted to get rid of the bugs, and they wanted to make way for canals and things. So they're just kind of this, you know, weed almost, but they have massive roles that they play in our ecosystem. People just don't know. I think it's a lack of information and education about them, and definitely like social just assumptions and beliefs about these ecosystems, and that if you don't take the time and you don't know what you're looking for, and you just don't know, then you're pretty much focused on what lies above the surface and kind of what you see. And if it doesn't immediately call your name, then I think people kind of brush it off.
Yeah. And you said you witnessed the bleaching of anemones in the bay. And how does that relate to coral bleaching in the open ocean?
So this is pretty fascinating thing that I learned in when this bleaching happened in 2023. I ended up co-publishing an article with a friend of mine, Abigail Geiger, who's a journalist. Shout out Abigail, love her. And we wrote this piece together about this bleaching event. And we came to find in our research that we were conducting and interviews that the bay got so hot that there wasn't sufficient fresh water in the bay, levels of fresh water, and it became really, really salty, like really overly salty and nutrient dense. And there's already not enough fresh water flowing down into the bay, which made it worse, but it was essentially evaporating all the fresh water. So this really, really salty water naturally with the tides shifted over to the ocean side. Now, typically, also to mention, this water was incredibly hot, like 101 plus degrees. And typically you have a thermocline in the ocean. So hot water is less dense, floats on top, colder water sinks at the bottom. But in this case, the hot water was so salty that it was actually denser than the cooler ocean water, and it started to sink. And it sank and blanketed all of these shallow reefs on the Atlantic side. And if you were to dive down, you would actually see this layer of bay water or estuary water, and it's kind of yellow and kind of turbid looking, like foggy, and you would see it just hanging out right over the reefs, and it essentially suffocated the reefs. And it doesn't really move. It kind of just hangs out, right, for a long time. And so, yeah, without that sufficient like movement of water, it suffocated the reefs. So that was a very unexpected thing to learn. I didn't realize that they were that connected. But yeah, it was very much responsible. And the farther south you go in the Keys, the more space between each of the keys, they start to open up and you get more bridges, right? So there's more movement between the bay and the Atlantic. And so the bleaching event was even worse the farther south that you went, because this hot, shallow bay water was shifting over into the ocean and sinking and totally suffocating all of these reefs. So very interesting. Makes total sense, but it's never been officially studied and published as they call it an inverse thermocline or reverse thermocline. So it's flipped, it's upside down. But only, scientists in here have witnessed it, but, there's not like a ton of research on it. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's happening. And actually the scientist that we spoke to, the scientist that we spoke to took a cup and scooped water from that layer while they were diving and covered it and took it up and tested that water, and it was consistent with bay water, which is crazy. And like 20 feet deep in the ocean. So you're like, what? So yeah, that confirmed that hypothesis that they had. That's what it was.
Wow, nature is crazy sometimes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that definitely wouldn't have expected something like that to happen. And I've also not heard about it, so I think it didn't get like big in the news. I've heard, Florida, the reefs are bleaching, but about that I haven't heard, only from you.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things that the scientists are aware of, but do people really care? Like, why? Or are they just going to care that they are bleaching? And it's not the first time, obviously, that this has happened in the sense of it isn't the first time that this bay water has shifted over and suffocated the reefs and resulted in bleaching. These tidal patterns, they're always happening. So these systems are intricately linked, and what we're doing to the bay, or what's happening on the bay, and what we're doing to the ocean and what's happening there, they're communicating constantly. So, but it's not always, that's not as interesting, it seems, as, coral bleaching, big tagline, and like we're accustomed now to seeing in the news so much.
Yeah, I think it also depends how it is communicated, and if scientists are working with other people that can maybe translate the science a bit easier so people can understand it and it's more intriguing to them.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what we aim to do with that article. Yeah. And I think it was a good way of kind of explaining, like, this is what happened. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And you monitored the mangrove forest near your home across several seasons, observing changes in temperature, salinity, and animal presence. What were your trends and wildlife you saw over that period?
Yeah, that's there's so much stuff that I've noticed and trends that I've seen. And it's hard because it's just been 1 year. So I have no idea technically, like, what is technically a trend and what's just things that are like suddenly happening. But I've definitely noticed the color change that happens between the seasons. There's so many macroalgae in this ecosystem, seaweed basically, and they're all so bright and so colorful, and pretty much a majority of them are working as filters in the system. But when you have these different macroalgae appear different times of year, what it's signifying is a change in the water quality. And that, meaning certain times of year when there's less rain, you're going to get and less fresh water moving into that system. You might have higher nutrient levels, higher levels of nitrogen and phosphorus. But then at the same time, there's a balance. So once it starts to rain, it kind of evens that out. And there's these cooler temperatures that these macroalgae can thrive in. So you get these really wonderful colors for many of the cool months. And then as things start to switch, typically in June, and this is again me theorizing here, but in June I noticed initially like a massive change. I think it was the first month where this heat really hit, and a lot of these macroalgae hit their limit or their threshold, and then they just die off. And the system, obviously, when these algae die off, there's this kind of explosion of nutrients that happens in the water, and then suddenly different microalgae come onto the scene. So you get these brown algae and things that can be responsible for harmful algal blooms, right? And they can eventually release toxins and things like that. And so, to some degree, I found and noticed a lot of these dinoflagellates, these like microscopic algae coming in and coating the surface of a lot of things. And they have these air bubbles. And so it's like a unique, very, very unique looking thing. And it just looked like everything was decaying. It was gross. And I think that's natural. I really do. I mean, obviously, I think that's part of the system. Things get hot, they hit their threshold, and they don't survive. Some of these algae, not everything, but some of these algae hit their limit at like 33 degrees Celsius or like 91 degrees Fahrenheit. And anything after that, that's pretty bad news, but they thrive in these cooler temperatures. And so, yeah, once it gets hot, that first month, that first big heat wave, you see how the forest senses it and then reacts, and things die off and new things come in to replace. And then you have different species spawning in the warmer months as well, like laying their eggs and spawning. So you have like a bunch of tiny anemones, and you have a bunch of tiny little tunicates, like different animals that are all stuck to these mangrove roots, and they're all, blooming, it feels like, and coming to life. And yeah, tons of like crazy colors on a smaller level, it feels like I really had to look close in the summer months. And it's just after spring too. So things have laid eggs and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just so strange to see these colors flip flop. And so lots of reds. I saw a lot of red and pink and purple and stuff in the cooler months. And then, the summer came and it was like brown and yellow. And you also get more of that microalgae growing in the summer months because the days are longer. So you have a ton of light. So they can photosynthesize, and it's warmer. So bacteria thrives in warmer situations. So they can feed off bacteria in the water. And then you also have all of this runoff from all the rain that comes in the summer months in the wet season that's pushing all these excess nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, into these bodies of water. So you start to get those potential algal blooms. But I have watched this forest. I mean, it seems to balance itself out. Which is pretty fascinating, right? I haven't seen anything like catastrophic since that crazy, 2023. Everything was like dead, and it was disgusting. But it seems to balance itself out pretty well, and it's pretty shaded in the forest on the edges and stuff. So I think things do well in those kind of cooler environments. And then there's always, a bunch of megafauna. I did also notice that there's a lot of jellyfish in the water column in the warmer months. You see them swimming around a lot more. Maybe they're spawning more, but there's more nutrients in the water in the summer, like heavy, like gross, hot, soupy water. And jellyfish thrive off that. So we have comb jellyfish back here, and they're everywhere too. So I definitely noticed those more in the water column in the summer months, but they're kind of chilling on the bottom, not as everywhere in the winter too. So yeah, well, different little trends that I've noticed, and continue to log those, which will be interesting. But yeah, and then it all comes back once the cooler water comes in the cooler months. It just feels fresher. It's like, I think this environment really likes the cool, like 70s, like 68 to 75 is a great range of temperature for this forest. It just really comes to life.
And did you notice from summer to winter different animals there? Or were it always the same animals, or were they in different layers? I mean, you can't go that deep really, but are they like hidden somewhere in winter or in summer? Or are they always in the same places?
That's a good question. I do, because I see certain things, like what I did notice a lot were, in the cooler months, these like amazing sponges come to life. And then towards like the spring and then in the summer, there was a lot of sponges too. And then they die off. Like I'm watching a lot of things come to life have a life cycle, and then they sort of just die off. It's like flowers almost, it's like is the best way to think about it. But so there are things that are consistently there, but for the most part, when I'm thinking of animals too, I think a lot of these bigger animals like manatees, when the waters are warmer, they like to come in, but I have manatees here in the winter too, so it's a little inconsistent. We have crocodiles here as well, so I would say for the most part, because our temperatures are relatively consistent in the Keys, that the early fall and the springtime is pretty similar. We only have a couple of cold fronts kind of coming through, so for the most part, I find that I see most things pretty consistently. There are fish migrations that happen this time of year. So you get these insane tarpon in the springtime, huge, like old looking dinosaur, big fish that are 100 pounds. Like they're big. And they come and appear, and it's usually their migrations that happen. So yeah, we have different things, but it's relatively consistent for the most part from what I've observed. I also, with the hurricane season, had to take several months away in the fall because I just couldn't get out there with the wind and my inflatable paddleboard. I'd blow away. So this year will be another year to see, okay, well, I saw this last year. Will I see it again? But I think for the most part, things are relatively consistent. Aside from spring, you do get a lot of things spawning. And so you'll probably see a lot of juvenile stuff late spring and early summer.
Yeah, I guess since the temperatures don't vary that much, it's not that much of a difference of the animals. Like in the Mediterranean, where I'm all the time, there is quite a big difference from winter to summer, what you can see and where you can see it. So I was just wondering how it is there in the Keys.
I bet that must be amazing knowing these trends and knowing that you're going to see something this time of year. And, and I think with fish, it's pretty common, but specifically in the mangrove forest, it seems to be relatively consistent aside from the breeding cycles and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, in the Mediterranean, or at least where I'm always at, the temperature from winter to summer is quite a big difference. And then animals that are usually deeper, they come up. We just were there. I mean, this episode is coming out later this year, but now as of recording, we're in February. And I was just there with a couple of members of Scene Blue, and we saw a lot of fish that we usually see at 30-40 meters in a cave at like 2 meters. So it's just because of the temperature, I suppose. I'm not a biologist, but it's just what I've seen.
That's amazing. That reminds me, because a lot of the reef species, so the reason these mangrove forests one of the reasons they're so important is that there are these sanctuaries for animals to lay their eggs, spawn, or lay their eggs, and then to leave the juveniles to grow. And so a lot of species that you find on the Atlantic side, they migrate to the bay and they lay their eggs. And then, so, we have little barracuda and lots of snapper and lots of parrotfish and, things that you'll see out on the reef as well, but they're here because it's safe, because there's an abundance of food and there's, protection and lots of biodiversity here. So it's a great place to raise your young. And so you will see those trends of fish, spawning and then laying their eggs here. And then I always find the barracudas funny because they're so big and menacing looking, out on the reef in the lighthouse. Like there's these huge barracuda and they just sit there and they're looking at you. And then you see them all over the mangroves, little baby ones. And like, that's not so intimidating until they go out to the reef. So yeah.
And beyond collecting data, you also captured extensive visual content. You often paddled out on your paddleboard, as we already saw, and you already told us that you almost fly away in autumn, was it? Right?
Yeah.
You go out with your You go out with your underwater housing, taking underwater photos from the paddleboard, and that sounds quite challenging to me. How do you manage that? And can you even see anything you're taking a photo of, or are you just aiming and hoping you're taking the shot?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I have a inflatable paddleboard. And it's so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. Like, it's huge. It's like 12 feet long. It's great. I love it because it's so light. It's so easy to maneuver on it. But it's the only thing that I can use in this environment. That will allow me to photograph what I'm photographing without disturbing everything else. I use a paddleboard because I can lay down on it. I can sit crisscross. I can, and I oftentimes use my feet to my toes, and I grip onto the mangrove roots, and I'm holding myself in. It's hard. It's really hard to balance yourself. I have, ropes that I hook onto my board that I will like loop onto a branch or something to sort of stabilize myself. But it is incredibly difficult to take photos from a paddleboard in a very shallow environment. Any slight movement and your board's already moving, and there's small currents through this area too, and these creeks that I go through, and it's just like, oh my gosh. So it's hard, but so people would probably think like, well, why can't you just stand and take these photos? And there's only one area that I can do that in, where the substrate is rocky, and I can put on boots and I can sort of walk around on these rocks, but I don't like to walk around. I typically will just paddle and drag my paddle fin and everything, right? Like across these rocks, pretty bad. But I want to be careful and cognizant of the fact that there's so many things living between these rocks, living in the seaweed everywhere. I have no idea what I could be stepping on and destroying. So I have to be really, really cautious. So this is the best way for me to not harm anything. And then also the rest of the forest, where I'm going, the substrate, the soil is like, it's peat soil. It's made of decomposing vegetation. It's very fluffy. If you even so much as kind of change the current of the water, or, across the surface of that soil, it just like plumes up. And even working with sand, I think, is easier because that'll settle. It's heavier. This stuff is it's fluffy and it's like dust, in the water, and it's everywhere. And if I was to actually step on it, I would sink at least 4 feet. So there's no walking around or anything like that. It's silty, is very mucky. So the paddleboard has been a great tool and being able to take the photographs. Now my housing is at least 10 pounds, and the thing is brutally heavy. With the camera inside, obviously, and then the light rig that I have and everything. So it's a lot of lugging it in and out of the water, and being able to see, okay, well, how am I going to compose this shot? What can I see from this angle? Let me try one shot. I have a strobe, and there's so much particulate in the water from the soil and just things moving around that I have to be cognizant of the direction of my lights so as not to get too much backscatter, right? So there's a lot of elements at play. I am kind of shooting blind in the sense that I can't really see obviously my viewfinder, screen, nothing, and I don't have an external monitor because they're expensive. Maybe one day I'll, get one loaned to me or sponsored or whatever, but which would be so much easier. My gosh, but I think part of the challenge is what makes it so valuable is figuring out how to make it work, and oftentimes, I'll take the photos. Okay, I need to change this or try that. And then I look at it, when I pull the rig up, and I'm like, oh, that looks like it's going to be good. And then it's either horrible, totally out of focus once I offload it into my computer, or it's one of the best photos I've ever taken, which just happened, actually. I unexpectedly, it was the last photo of the day, and I was like, this is the best photo I have ever taken. And I remember in the moment, I was like, oh God, I'm like, this is all I'm wedging this housing between roots, and the light around this mangrove root. It's a very complex and intricate system and forest to work with. But I found the thing that works for me, and I make it work. And it's been super great. It'd be so much easier if I could snorkel or stand. Can't snorkel because I'm working with inches of water. It's too shallow and there's no way to stand. So my board it is, although sometimes I've made mistakes. I took my fin off of my board so I could go across a flat through these mangroves, and that was probably this much water. And I obviously couldn't have a fin on my board, so I reached around unscrewing it, and then I totally forgot about it. And when I pulled all my gear up and was rinsing everything off, I had let it fall into the canal without noticing. So I was stranded, with no fin and a paddleboard. Which, if you've ever done that, that's brutal. That you can't. No. So it was hard, paddling around without that fin. Afterwards, but doing it on the flat, it was worth it for the photos. But afterwards I was like, all right, guess I'm gonna have to order a new one. Wait for it to come before I can get out there again. So
have you ever tried using the Bluetooth function on your camera to connect with your phone? Because if you're not going deep, that might work.
I've never thought about that. That's a great idea. That's genius. I should totally try that. My phone's a piece of crap though. Yeah, I should try that. I know, because I know you can do it obviously to send photos, but I've never, I don't know if there was like a live,
there is, I think.
Do you like have it as a monitor? Like you can connect your phone as a live monitor? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do know what you mean. Okay. Yeah. I have not tried that with the underwater housing.
Okay.
But that would be an interesting thought. Yeah, I'd have to somehow waterproof my phone and then see how to connect that. Thinking. This is good thinking. Yeah.
There are like these baggies you can put it in. It even comes sometimes with the pedal boards.
Which is helpful. Yes.
Then it's waterproof. I don't know if it works. You have a Sony camera as well, right?
I do have a Sony camera, yes.
Yeah, and a Nauticam housing.
A Nauticam housing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if it goes through the metal, the connection, but maybe. And then you can, I think it's the Sony imaging app that you can try that I have used that as a monitor before.
And
when I was
worked?
taking like portraits of me.
Oh.
Yeah, it worked. Well, not underwater because I'm like really going deeper.
Yeah.
Just under the surface, but I've done it on land. So if you're not going deep, it should work.
Oh, good.
Or you can try. I don't know if it goes through the metal, but it's worth a try maybe that you can see what you're seeing underwater.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's such a great idea. Thank you for that.
You once described the life you discover in the mangroves as resembling galaxy and outer space. Could you elaborate on that comparison? I have photos here open that we can have a look at whilst you talk about it, and I think we can get a bit of a clearer vision with those photos about what you're talking.
Absolutely. Yes. I have found this comparison to space being out there. Just so many different elements, one of them being this weightlessness and anti-gravity environment where things are floating as they would in space. These jellyfish just remind me of flying saucers and against this kind of dark shadows, and then the particulate in the water, kind of looks like stars, right? And it's kind of this very galactic atmosphere and theme kind of going on. And I felt like I was looking into outer space sometimes, just the way things move through the water column. Like you're like, whoa, this is crazy. It is so anti-gravity, and it doesn't feel like it's something of this earth. It's sort of like this portal into a different world, which is pretty amazing. And then the tulip snails, the print on their flesh is very also looks like a galaxy in these pinks and purple hues and reds, and then they're speckled with little white dots, and it just looks like it looks like like a Milky Way galaxy, right? Or like some sort of nebula or something. And then these kind of spiral shapes as well, the shells and these different types of worms and things that have these spiral shapes that are, again, very much like a galaxy. And yeah, just the colors too. In that next photo, there's, these weird looking, it looks like alien eggs, but they're tunicates. They're animals. They're animals that have a heart and a digestive system and a circulatory system and blood. And they just, I thought that they were alien eggs or something, but they're actual animals. They're colonial animals, but each little round thing you see on the left there with the blue, like those are all individual animals, which is really fascinating. Yeah, and then you've got these like sponges and what I presume are some sorts of microalgae seaweeds that are purple, and you're like, what are these things? And then the tentacle-like anemones, and it is so different to something that you would see on land. And the ocean is oftentimes an inspiration for space movies, like James Cameron's Avatar. His inspiration for Avatar was the deep sea. It was the ocean. And so you see these parallels between extraterrestrials and something so far away, but it's actually right here under the surface. And yeah, I think the colors and the visuals really lend itself to this kind of very galaxy, very outer space feeling. And the creatures are just very strange looking too. They're the sea slugs and even a crab, like you look at a crab up close, you're like, what are you? Some sort of like giant ant, like, I don't know, like those crazy giant alien bugs. Like that's what they look like to me. And so, yeah, we're so used to seeing these things on land, or seeing animals and wildlife on land. But when you actually go underwater, you're going to see things you just never seen before. I mean, there's some crazy stuff, jelly-like. It's like perfect. I could tell you this is another planet. You probably believe me, but no, it's in my backyard,
Amazing. Yeah, I think especially also with snails on land, they're just, well, kind of gross looking, but then underwater they can have so many different forms and shapes and colors, and it looks so amazing. Exactly. I've seen one flying, or like not really flying, but like floating through the ocean the other time, and I was like, is that a jellyfish? No, it's not. It's a snail. Okay.
It's a snail. I was like, how did I get from one place to another? That's amazing. Yeah, you're like, what is it? Who knows? That's amazing.
Yeah, when I was trying to identify it, I was looking through the lexica, and I was like looking for a jellyfish, and I was like, I can't find it. Then I looked through the snails, so I was like, okay,
there it is.
It's a snail, not a jellyfish.
That is so weird.
Yeah. Well, the ocean and marine life is pretty amazing.
It's so amazing, and we don't know what's there, And I think this idea that to find space, and this is actually a theme I've been working with this project. To find space, you have to go to the depths of the ocean, 5 miles below the surface, the darkest, deepest corners of the ocean, and there you'll find, alien creatures. And realistically, you can see them at the surface. I mean, they're right. You don't have to go that far. You don't have to have a special type of rover. You don't have to have $1 million. You can walk to the edge of the water on a dock at a restaurant and peer down, and you will be amazed at what you find. You just have to be curious and patient. Like, look down and be mindful of what you're looking at.
Yeah, I think look at, like, if you were a child still, and with wonder just explore what's around you. And
exactly,
that's the way we should look more often.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes, the childlike sense of wonder,
Yeah. Mangroves are remarkable plants. Can you explain a bit more their ecological importance to our listeners?
Like I mentioned before, they are nurseries for a lot of species, and for them to lay their eggs, these kind of places of safe harbor and protection. So they offer safety and protection for a lot of species, and they're also responsible for filtering water. They, along with seaweeds, kind of working together, but they filter out a lot of pollutants from the water. They also filter out the air, a lot of pollutants and dust in the air with their leaves as well. They also sequester carbon, so they're pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and they're burying that deep into the soils, which is awesome, especially nowadays with our environment and our climate and how it's changing. And they are really important specifically for coastal communities in the sense that they act like rebar in cement and they hold the shoreline together. And they help prevent erosion of coastlines. So when you have mangroves along your coast, with time, water is going to erode away, and mangroves actually protect against that erosion by holding things together. They are also really good at it's so amazing. But when you have a storm and you have really high winds and really intense waves or current, mangroves can actually absorb that energy from the wind and from the water and disperse it really, really well. And on the other side of the mangroves, you won't even hear the wind, which is really crazy, and the water will be completely still. So when we have really big storms, and it's known that during hurricanes down here, people will oftentimes tie their boats up inside of creeks because they know that inside of these mangrove creeks, the mangroves will protect the tree. And if you didn't tie your boat well enough, then that's your problem. But the mangroves do a wonderful job of protecting against these high winds and these waves and whatnot. So that also further protects coastal communities. So I think those are some of the biggest roles that they play, as well as just being a host of biodiversity, right? So above the water, so many birds and bugs, insects, spiders, and lizards, and ants, and all kinds of creatures depend and live within the mangroves. A lot of birds nest and roost in these mangroves, especially migratory birds. And then in the water, you've got everything, all kinds of stuff living on the roots, between the roots, feeding off of the things that live in the roots or on the roots. And yeah, it's just incredibly diverse. So, I love the split shots of the tree, but then you go underwater and it's just, there's so much going on and there's so much living in that system.
That sounds really amazing. Did you get to explore that all the time and then show it with everyone? That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it is really fun. It's what's nice about it too is that it's unique to this area. I do believe. I mean, I think that there are a lot of areas where you have that very clear water with the mangroves, like in Indonesia, and very vibrant corals and sponges. More honestly, water that's clearer than what I have back here. But it's unique, I think, too, to have all these colors in this area because not all mangroves look like that, right? Some of them really are in kind of swampy and dark areas. So it's really cool to know that they're still doing all this stuff, but how they look and depending on where they are, they I think build different looking ecosystems. So I'm lucky that right here I've got this very beautiful, very colorful, very vibrant ecosystem that I can take pictures of and share with people.
Yeah. You know these mangrove forests quite intimately, and even at night. Your motivation to venture out in the dark with your camera stemmed from a memorable dinner conservation with legendary ocean advocate Dr. Sylvia Earle. Really amazing that you got to meet her and talk with her. That sounds like an unforgettable evening for a conservationist. What was it like taking photos at night on your paddleboard? It must have been both exhilarating and a bit nerve-wracking, considering the presence of large predators and you not being able to see what's around you, what's in front of your little light.
I know, it's terrifying. I have a really strong headlamp and I'm like, this is not... this will not save me, but it'll give me a warning, right? I don't. that's kind of the funny thing about the nighttime stuff. It's when Dr. Sylvia Earle was like, what are you doing that you haven't been exploring at nighttime? That's when all the cool stuff comes out. Like, you have to. I'm like, okay, I will, I promise. And if she tells you to do something, you got to do it. So I started off going slowly, right? Like, I was nervous because the water is just so dark in the canal, like to get between the mangroves, and all of the water is, it's just dark, and it's a little eerie sometimes, but it's honestly, it was something that I kind of challenged myself to do. I haven't been out through the night because I don't want to do that alone, and because it can be dangerous if I'm on my own, and with boat traffic and things like that also in the area. I do have a light, so that's good. But I recently have been staying out past sunset and as the darkness completely takes over. And it's pretty amazing because there's a fear. There's like this natural innate fear of like, what is here that, that like could do something to me? I don't know. But it's amazing because just as the sun sets, so many things come to life, and there's so many sounds out on the flats, and there's the water rip over here, and this gasp over here, and this flop over here, and there's so many things that are coming out and feeding, and I wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't have been out there at the end of the day, right at like 5:36 when the sun is starting to set. It was so beautiful to just see these things come. I'm like, oh my God, they're everywhere. With these nudibranchs specifically, it was like 5:30 p.m. and all of a sudden they're coming out for dinner, and they were all over the mangroves. So I'm like, I haven't seen these things in years, because I was out in the middle of the day, out in the grass flats. So it was very cool to see things coming out in their routine, and just listening, and the birds are honking, and they're all flying around feeding off the fish. So everything comes alive. It's like it has its own system, and we're so detached from it because we're just living our lives and doing our things. But this forest, these natural ecosystems, like they have their routines too. And so being out when the sun sets is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's so beautiful. And then everyone's rushing to get in, right? And I'm just lingering. I'm out there and taking photos and looking at all these creatures that are, starting to hunt themselves, especially things that aren't photosynthesizing anymore, right? Like now it's our time to hunt. So it's very cool. And I'm going to continue doing it for sure, because I'm very curious to see how the evening time brings everything to life in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going in the night in the ocean is always a great experience. It just takes a little bit to do it at first.
Yes.
But then when you've done it, it's always amazing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. People ask me, do you go night diving? I'm like, no. But now that I've done it on the paddleboard and I'm, moving around, I'm like, well, maybe I could do it one of these days.
We should go night diving somewhere together sometime.
Let's do that, please. I'd love to do that with you.
And what fascinates you most about using storytelling to convey the beauty and urgency of nature conservation?
That's a great question. I think storytelling is something that's been used since the beginning of time in order for us to connect. And whether it's connecting with each other or connecting across time. And it's just, it is so innate to humans as our means of communication. And I think so many of us do it all the time without even realizing it. And in today's digital age, I think the soul of storytelling has been diluted a bit in terms of, people trying to tell stories or there's so much false information out there. There's so much quick, just let me feed that dopamine circuit. Like it's a strange time, I think, for storytelling, because it feels a lot of times nowadays a bit inauthentic. And so, in the space of conservation, when we're trying to communicate these important things, but things that really matter to us because we're a part of it. Like nature matters because it's here and because we are so much a part of it. and trying to get people to care about something so that they can help protect it because it's threatened. It's a tricky task, but I think that storytelling is, I mean, it is the most efficient way because I think it helps people. It transports them and it puts them, you know, where you are, and it helps them understand your emotions behind it, and it makes them feel a part of the story. And I think, yeah, people want to take action when they feel like it affects them. And I think with effective storytelling and someone who knows how to tell a good story and who knows how to use powerful visuals and how to use sound and all these different elements and compose a compelling story, I think that they can make a lot of change with that because it's going to touch the hearts of listeners and it's going to evoke a heavy emotional response. And yeah, I mean, I've done it in a limited capacity, you know, with my reels. I'd love to do something bigger someday, but there's nothing more beautiful, I think, and powerful than a moment in which you are totally just enraptured by something in front of you, and maybe even like whether it's a movie or the things actually happening, but those moments of like, oh my, like you're crying, right? Like it hits deep, like that is like the pinnacle of humanity, right? Of like having a soul is having those really emotional moments. And so if you can make something that helps somebody feel that way or allows somebody to feel, because that's what humans are, like we are beings, we feel, and yeah, creating something that makes people feel is like magic, you know, it's beautiful. So I think it's a great tool. It's a great tool to, it's not boring, it's not, you know, it's the human experience captured in a package. Here you go, like experience it. So
yeah, that's a good explanation of how stories can make people feel and inspire them.
Yeah, thank you.
You are now part of the storytelling team at Nature Conservancy, as we already touched on before. Could you walk us through your current responsibilities within the organization? What is your work? How are you creating there?
Yes. Yes, I am with the Nature Conservancy now. It's been about a year and a half, and currently working within the storytelling team, which is in marketing and communications division. And within storytelling, there's another team, a smaller team for editorial and content. And I'm a coordinator with them, but I am doing a lot of different things, which has been really fun. Everything from helping to produce social media content. So you'll see, you know, my videos on our flagship social media channels, like Instagram and I think TikTok and other services, streaming or not other social media platforms. So I'll be creating content in that regard, also doing a lot of translation work. So I'm bilingual, so I can help translate pieces between English and Spanish, things that go on our website, articles and whatnot, stories and things of that nature. Specifically with our team, we've developed a calendar in which we have these campaigns, like big campaigns that we're pushing across the entire organization. And the idea is to create kind of more consistency across the media that we are sharing with people based on the time of year and all of these campaigns. So right now, our big marketing campaign is a forest campaign. And so essentially we are creating these content packages with materials relating to forests and the power of forests and the importance of trees and forests, and sending that out internally to all of these different marketing, all these different teams across the US. And so then the idea is like these teams will help promote and also tell their local stories about their own forests and engaging people. So it creates more cohesion across the entire organization. But yeah, so creating content for pieces online and newsletters. So a lot of content creation that's going onto different, everything from websites to newsletters and email to, social media channels. And then like a lot of logistic work as well, because it takes a lot of organization in order to keep all these different projects running. So while we have these big campaigns, we also have smaller things that are operating, internal projects, It's a lot of different work and a lot of different projects, but it's been really fun to learn about all of the work that TNC is doing around the world through these campaigns, and by creating all of this content and writing these pieces and putting all of these things together and all these memos together and everything, learning a lot about like, oh, this is the stuff that TNC is doing on a global scale. And it's amazing to learn and to promote that work and to see, all the different ways in which this organization is involved at the local level, all the way up to governments, and really, really making a difference, really making a change.
Sounds amazing. And you've experienced creating captivating social media content, not only for the Nature Conservancy, but also for your personal account. What do you believe is the key to producing engaging content that resonates with audiences and promotes nature conservation?
That's a great question. It's funny because, like I mentioned before, some of the aspects of storytelling have become like a little bit diluted. Like you'll see things that maybe don't follow the traditional form of storytelling, and you're like, how did that go viral, right? So I think in a digital age, it's kind of confusing, and a lot of it is left up to this algorithm, right? But there are trends that you can observe, and larger trends that you can observe, and then kind of implement into the things that you're doing, whether it's using the viral sounds or the different techniques of starting a sentence and saying, and then prompting people to read your description, right? Elements like that. It's like these are the more social media things. And very fast paced as well. But I think, being aware of like what is being consumed by audiences is, if you want to prosper in that regard, and you want to get all that engaging content and whatnot. What's been tricky for me is everything that I post on my personal page, I post because I made it for myself. I post because I thought it was beautiful. And I've tried to do some stuff, like the trends and whatnot. But for the most part, it all started because I wanted to make something. I just wanted to make something beautiful. I never imagined that it would actually resonate with people. But I think that there are elements of it, slowing things down. They're practical elements of storytelling. But slowing things down to pull focus to your characters, or finding a song or music or a sound that that's the voice of your story. So you have to be aware of what that says about what you're showing. There's a mood, there's a tone that's conveyed. And then also, like, what is your story arc? How are you showing it, right? Like, what is the story that's developing here, if there's anything at all? And so it's a balance for social media. You want to be trendy, but for me, I consider my page to be a curated gallery of work. I don't share very much stuff very often, where people are like, why aren't you sharing all the time? I'm like, because I'm not an influencer. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do. As much as it might seem that way to some people, I'm like, no, I only post stuff, when I want to share something, or it's a very specific, very curated thing. And I don't want to just throw things on there. It's a portfolio of work, and then you just care too much about the numbers. So I urge people that, don't think about everybody else. Like, why are you making this? And what's your purpose? And does it resonate with you? Go out and be curious and make something because it's a fun thing for you. It's a hobby. You think of other hobbies too, it's like people will knit. It doesn't mean that you have to go and knit 1,000 things in the month of January and then post it and, sell everything. And if you don't sell, like, no, it's like sometimes you just want to knit because you want to knit. So it's kind of the same thing with photography. It's like, don't dilute the meaning behind it for you as the photographer, for you as the creator. If for you it's special, keep it that way, and don't let anyone take that from you.
That's great advice. I think with social media, a lot of people care a lot about the numbers and think, oh, what's trending? What can I do? Mm-hmm. I was also, when I was looking what I could do, I was looking through the trends and was like, but I don't want to do that. I try to post something that resonates with me, that fits with me and my style, and not get that many views, but reach the people hopefully that are interested in what I do, instead of creating TikTok dance. That is not kind of my thing, or using a sound that I can't relate to.
No, people are attracted to authenticity. So if you are authentic in your message and authentic in what you're doing, my friend said this to me once. She was like, people don't know what they're looking for until they see it. And so, when you stay true and authentic to your thing, you will be surprised at how that may resonate with so many, many people. But it does take consistency. If that's the goal, is to promote this sort of stuff, you have to be consistent for sure. I am consistently inconsistent. So there we go. I was like, people know not to expect a ton of content from me throughout the year. But I prefer, these in-person events and talking and sharing my experiences. And I love doing that. And so this podcast is I love this sort of stuff. I would much prefer to do this and talk about my work this way than, like you said, make some kitschy TikTok dance that's like, what is that doing? It's like, that means you're producing it for other people to watch. It's like, no, you should produce it for you. And people will join in when they see how great it is. So
yeah. Unless you're a dancer, don't go on with the TikTok dances, or if you're fun, if you have fun with that. For conservation messages, maybe it can work if you're a talented dancer, and if that's fun for you. Yeah. For me, I think, no.
Like, I'll avoid that.
And we're already at the end, and the final question. For those aspiring to use storytelling as a tool for conservation, what advice would you offer them?
I think what we just talked about, I think being authentic, like I said, people are attracted to authenticity. So part of storytelling is, I think, is obviously the message or whatever sort of information or whatever story you're trying to convey. But, don't be afraid of making yourself a part of that story. As the storyteller, oftentimes, it can be easy to hide behind the camera, but I think sometimes putting yourself out there, and being curious, and asking the questions, and then and being authentic in that process and showcasing that, I think that's like less intimidating for viewers and for people. So, but being honest in that process, and sticking true to the elements that resonate with you, because that, those are the human parts of you, right? Like the things that resonate with you and the things that make you feel, like, show that to people and translate that to people, because that's what ultimately I think audiences are looking for. They're looking for, well, how do I see myself in this story? How does it relate to me? I've said this before. It's not what you say so much as how you say it. It's not what the content is so much as how you are delivering it. And so, don't be afraid to just, be emotional, touch to the emotions, and, make it human, because that's what people are hungry for, especially in a digital age. But the emotions, and do your research. Like, I think it's important to know some of the basic elements. Like, if you want to get better, then you're going to have to practice, and you're going to have to produce some stuff that isn't that great. And then you're going to have to watch it and be like, oh, that wasn't that great. But challenge yourself, and it's not out of reach. You don't need the fanciest equipment. That stuff will come with time. What you need is the heart and the passion and the curiosity. And the elements that matter. You're the human here, and make us feel like a part of that story. So I think people are storytellers. Naturally, we are storytellers. It's in us, but we just have to hone it sometimes. And I think especially with conservation specifically, we can't talk to animals, right? But I think stories, for example, everyone always talks about my octopus teacher. And, that resonated with us so much because we got to see this relationship between a person and then this creature. And it was a human element. So it was touching to our, it was evoking that emotional response in us, because we felt like we were in the water, with that octopus. We felt like we were the diver. And so, yeah, I think that's a brilliant way of, maybe you have to do something out of the box, something a little unconventional, but yeah, stay true to you. Uh, and you'd be pretty amazed at what kind of stories I think you're capable of telling.
Well, thank you so much, Gabby, for sharing your journey and insights with us today. Your work is not only inspiring, but also a powerful reminder of the role of storytelling and what it can play in protecting our planet. I'm looking forward to seeing your future projects and continue to follow your impact work. Thank you so much. I hope we see each other soon and do something together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sabine, for having me. And I'm so grateful that you asked me to be on this podcast and having a platform to talk about this. So thank you for the work that you do as well. And I'm looking forward
Thank you
to
for
seeing you
sharing.
soon. Yeah. Thank you.